video, we are going to discuss the questions from the topic Approaches to Research, which were asked in NTA UGC in December 2020 and June 2021 merge cycle. So, if you consider the module Research Aptitude, Approaches to Research is a very important area, and we are getting questions very frequently from this area as well. So, I have taken a few sample questions from this particular topic that were asked in this particular exam, December 2020 and June 2021 merge cycles, and through these questions, we'll be focusing on the various aspects of the different types of approaches that can be associated with research. So basically, we can actually categorize these various approaches to research into three different groups or categories in general. So the first and foremost category is quantitative and qualitative research, that is an approach to research. Then we have inductive and deductive approach, and also we have positivistic and post-positivistic approach to research as well. So if you consider the ideas that are being discussed in these different categories, it might seem overlapping in some situations. So you might have a proper idea. If you have a proper idea about these three different categories, then that will be really helpful for you to answer the questions that were asked from this particular area in general as well. So if you consider qualitative and quantitative research, there the emphasis is focused on the data that we are using to do the research. So for example, if you're considering qualitative research, in qualitative research, the data being analyzed or the data being collected is basically having a qualitative nature to it, right? We are particularly focusing on how people respond to different situations, how people behave in different situations. That kind of ideas are being discussed in qualitative research. So the data that are being collected in qualitative research is basically, or the tool that we are using in order to do this particular research is basically what we are explaining, we are exploring things, and that is how we are doing qualitative research. And when it comes to quantitative research, we are collecting data that can be quantified. So basically, we'll be collecting data and we'll be interpreting it using mathematical and statistical devices. In that case, the data being collected and analyzed in a quantitative research is basically data that can be quantified. And when it comes to inductive or deductive approach to research, there we are focusing on the order or where we start and where we end the research. For example, if you consider inductive research, we will be focusing on a particular situation, particular event. We will be observing that situation and we will be collecting data from that particular case. And from that collected data, we are coming to a proper conclusion. That is inductive research. So we are actually using inductive reasoning there, right? We are starting from a specific case, and from that we will be coming up with general conclusions. But when it comes to deductive approach, what is the difference there? We are starting from a theory. So we are starting from a general theory from which we will be creating a hypothesis, and then we will be collecting data and we will be either affirming this particular hypothesis or we will be rejecting it. So the starting point is the general idea or the theory, and then we'll be moving forward to it. So basically, we are applying that theory to a specific case. So general to specific. That is how the reasoning flows in the deductive research or in the deductive approach to research as such. And when we come to positivism and post-positivism, what happens here? So basically, both of these ideas are related to philosophy. These are philosophical schools. And positivism is basically focusing on a reality that can be mathematically interpreted. And on the other hand, when we consider post-positivism, it is basically focusing on the subjective reality where we can have, let's say, if you consider reality in our own perspectives, the way I define reality might be different from that of yours, right? So we have our own ideas or our own experiences that together forms our own reality. In that respect, post-positivism says there is nothing called an objective reality. So you can have subjective opinions or you can have subjective definitions to reality as well. So this is how we can actually categorize these different approaches to research in general. So I have just give you an idea or a very general idea about the various categories or various approaches to research. Now we are moving to the questions that were asked from this particular area in December 2020 and June 2021 merge cycles net exam. So basically from these questions, we are actually going much deeper into these different concepts or different approaches to research. So here you have the first question. Identify the main features of qualitative research from the following. So, as I have already mentioned, through these questions, we are actually going much deeper into these concepts or these approaches to research, and basically you can actually connect these different approaches as well. Let's say if you consider qualitative approach, we can associate it with inductive approach as well. So, qualitative is similar, or the ideas that are shared in both these approaches are similar, or basically qualitative research generally follows inductive approach as well. So that kind of an idea will be really helpful for you to understand and to answer the questions that are related to this area. So just connect it like this: qualitative, inductive and post-positivistic approach. These are related to each other, and also quantitative, deductive and positivistic approaches are also related to each other. Or in other words, as I have already mentioned, qualitative researches are generally inductive in nature and quantitative researches are generally deductive in nature as well. So, qualitative is inductive as well as post-positivistic in nature. Quantitative is deductive as well as positivistic in nature. So, that is how we can understand this entire idea of approaches to research. Let's say, just look at this question. So, we have to identify the main features that are associated with qualitative research from the following. That is the question here. So, let's consider each and every options here, and then we will be focusing on it, and we will be analyzing whether it belongs to qualitative or quantitative research categories. So, here you have the first option. It is concerned with understanding the phenomena from the participants' perspective. So, when you consider qualitative research, I have already mentioned there that we are actually focusing on how people behave in certain way, or why they are behaving in certain ways, or why this particular group of people is like this. All these things will be considered in qualitative research. Let's say if you are doing an ethnographic research, this is basically a qualitative research where you are focusing on a particular group, ethnic group of people, and you are focusing on their culture, their food habits, their traditions. All these things will be focused there. So, basically when we consider qualitative research in general, it actually focuses on the perspective of the participants who are involved in that particular study. In that respect, we can say that option A is actually a feature that can be associated to qualitative research. Moving to the next option, it assumes that there are social facts with a single objective reality. So, when we have discussed about this positivistic and post-positivistic approach to research, we said that positivism is primarily focusing on a very objective kind of a reality, or a single objective reality, right? In post-positivism, it is more like subjective. So, when I have linked these three approaches, these three categories of approaches to research, I said that qualitative research can be associated with inductive as well as post-positivistic approach. In that case, post-positivism actually focuses on a very subjective reality, and the option that is given here is focusing on a very single objective reality. It assumes that there are social facts with a single objective reality. So, that is basically associated with quantitative research. So, this option cannot be associated with the question that is asked here. So, A can be considered, B can be eliminated. Option C, researcher becomes immersed in the situation, present or past. So, what I mean by that? So, as I have mentioned earlier, if you take the example of ethnographic research in general, what we are doing there? So, basically if you are going to study about a particular group of people, their habits, their traditions, their customs and all that, you have to first go and be a part of that group. You have to be immersed in that particular situation that you are going to study. If you're just moving away, you're just observing them, if you're not a part of that particular group of people, it is not that easy for you to understand the real essence of the culture or the traditions or the other aspects of the living conditions of that particular group, right? So, I have just taken ethnographic research to explain this idea, but when it comes to qualitative research, we can say the researcher must have to be a part of that particular situation that is under consideration. So, the researcher is like, the researcher should be immersed in that situation. He is not a person who is just like, act like a spectator who is just watching it and analyzing it, not like that. The researcher has to be a part, he has to be immersed in that particular situation. So, that is a very important quality or a very important feature that is associated with qualitative research. Coming to the next option, researcher is detached from the study to avoid bias. That is wrong. These two options are actually contradictory ideas. C says the researcher has to be immersed in the situation, and D says the researcher has to be detached from the study or the situation in order to avoid bias. So basically, C is the right option that can be associated with qualitative research, because the researcher has to be a part of the situation, not being detached from the study or the situation. So D can be eliminated. Then come to option E. There is greater flexibility in both the methods and research process. That is true. If you consider quantitative as well as qualitative research is having a more flexible approach to its methods and research process considered or compared to quantitative research. In that respect, we can take E as well. So what are the options you can pick out from this particular options that are given here? Option A is associated with qualitative research. We have already explained it. Then you have option C and also option E. So A, C, E is the right answer for this question. A, C and E only is option A. So the right answer for this question is obviously option A. Next question, which of the following is an example of qualitative research? And you have various options, various types of research given as well. So what are the options? We have experimental research, ex post facto research, descriptive survey research, and finally grounded theory research. So from the following, you have to identify an example of qualitative research. So basically, if you consider these options that are given, the first three options, experimental research, ex post facto research, descriptive surveys research, these three are basically examples of quantitative research. So the right answer for this question is basically option D, grounded theory research. We are not going to explain these three options, that is experimental research, ex post facto research and descriptive survey research in this session, but they are very important research types. You have to study about it. You can expect questions from that types of research as well. But here we are much focused on the approaches to research. So I am just focusing on the grounded theory research here. These different types of research or these areas should be covered by you when you are considering types of research under this particular module. We have done classes on all these types of research in our LMS as well. So considering option D, grounded theory research, this is basically an example of qualitative research. We have already said that, and this particular grounded theory approach was introduced by Glaser and Strauss in 1967 in order to validate qualitative research. So basically, what is the idea here? The theory is grounded in actual data. So we are focusing on a particular scenario issue, and we'll be collecting data and from that data or based on that data we are coming up with various theories. So basically the theory that we are proposing out of that particular situation or that particular study is firmly grounded on the observations or the data that we have collected from that particular situation. So theory is made upon, or the theory is grounded on actual data. We are collecting data, we are observing certain situations, maybe we are considering a particular scenario and we are collecting data from it, and based on that data we will be coming up with theories. So this actually involves the application of inductive reasoning as well. This is how these different approaches are connected to each other as well. So basically what we are doing, if we are focusing on a particular case and we are collecting data, and based on that data we are coming up with a theory. That is what we have done, or that is what we are doing in a grounded theory research. So basically we are starting from a specific case, and from that we are coming up with a general conclusion. So specific to general, that is inductive in nature. So that's how we are using the application of inductive reasoning in this research as well. So the steps that are involved in grounded theory is also very important, and here you have the various steps. We have framing chords, concepts, categories and theory. So we are collecting data, and those data will be identified as chords, and these chords will be categorized into different concepts. Similar chords will be categorized into concepts, and similar concepts will be categorized into categories, and finally similar categories together forms a theory, and that theory is firmly grounded on the data that we have gathered. So anyway, the right answer for this question is option D. We have already mentioned that. So an example of qualitative research from the options given below is option D, that is grounded theory research. Moving to the next question, which of the following are characteristics of quantitative research? So in the previous question, in the first question we have discussed about the various features that are associated with qualitative research. In this particular question, we are going to focus on the aspects of quantitative research. So basically, as I have already mentioned earlier, you have to focus on the points that we are discussing in this particular session, because all these ideas are actually contributing to a much more clearer idea about the various approaches to research that are under consideration. So let's consider the options given below. We have questions are open-ended, identified variables are measured, questions are standardized. If the sample size is large, the findings can be easily generalized. It is difficult to fix the level of measurement. So consider these two options, A and C. A says questions are open-ended, questions are standardized. So if you are making a questionnaire that will help you to gather data for research. If you consider quantitative research, it is more structured. It is basically collecting data that can be quantified, right? So the questions will be standardized. Okay, so if you're doing a qualitative research, the questions will be open-ended, because you have to identify how the people react to it, people's reactions, their attitudes. Those things will be focused when it comes to qualitative research. So the question should be open-ended. So that is associated to qualitative research. And if you consider quantitative research, the questions will be standardized. In that case, we can say that from these two options are focusing on the same thing. That's why we have taken those two options together. So in that case, we can say that the question is basically about quantitative research. In that respect, we can eliminate option A and consider option C. Okay, then coming to option B, identified variables are measured. So basically, when it comes to quantitative research, what we are focusing on, we will be identifying variables and we are actually measuring these variables as well. So let's say if we are considering like an example that we are using very regularly in our classes is how the income is influencing the rate of consumption. So if that's the case, we are focusing on two different variables here, income and consumption, right? So how the income is influencing a person's rate of consumption, or how this particular person is consuming things based on his or her income. So in that case, if you are making a study about these particular topic, here you have two different variables, income as well as rate of consumption, and basically we are focusing, or we are actually identifying these variables first and foremost, and then we will be measuring it as well. So that is what we are doing in a quantitative research. So option B can be taken as an answer for this question. So we said that B and C are answers, then consider option D. If the sample size is large, the findings can be easily generalized. So what do you mean by a sample? If you consider research, we are actually focusing a group of people or events from which we can actually gather data. Let's say if you are considering the issues that are faced by the Indian students or the Indian students who are studying abroad, if that is your consideration, or if you are focusing on the migration of student community from India to, let's say, Canada, if that's your area of concern, in that case we can say that you have an entire population there, or you have a universe there which includes all the students who have migrated from India to Canada for their studies. But it is not possible for you to go and identify or go and collect data from each and every people or each and every person who have migrated, right? So to make it more feasible, or to make this entire process of data collection more effective, you will be focusing on a very small group, or you will be collecting data from a group of people that can actually represent the entire community, the entire student community who have migrated from India to Canada, right? So that's how you will be collecting data. Maybe you will be focusing on 450 to 500 students, and you will be collecting data from them, and then you will be analyzing that particular data, right? That's how we are doing it. So that particular group from which we are collecting data can be called as the sample. And if the sample size is large, that means it can actually represent the universe or the entire population that is under consideration more effectively, right? So if the sample size is large, then the findings can be easily generalized. If the sample size is large, then that particular group of people is actually representing the entire population very clearly, so that we can easily generalize the conclusions that we get from the data analysis that we have done based on the data that we have collected from these people to the entire group of people that is under consideration. So if the sample size is large, these findings can be easily generalized. So that is right. So option D can be again taken as an answer. And coming to option E, it is difficult to fix the level of measurement. So what do you mean by this level of measurement or scales of measurement? So basically we can have various types of data that can be collected in order to make a study or a research, right? So based on the nature of the data, we will be using various scales of measurement in order to quantify or qualify that data that is being collected. So we have nominal, ordinal, different scales of measurement or levels of measurement in that sense. So it says it is difficult to fix the level of measurement. That is wrong. In quantitative research, we can easily understand the attributes of the data that we have collected, and it is not that difficult to fix the level of measurement that can be used or that can be appropriately used for the data that is being collected. So in that case, we can say that the features of quantitative research has to be identified from this particular option. So identified variables are measured, that is true. Then we have we have questions are standardized, so option C can be taken, and also option D can be taken, right? If the sample size is large, the findings can be easily generalized. So B, C and D will be answer for this question. So B, C and D only is option B, so the right answer for this question is option B itself. Moving to the next question, identify the features of empirico-inductive paradigm of research. So first and foremost, you have to have an idea about what you mean by this empirico-inductive paradigm of research. Then we will be focusing on the options that are given here. So if you consider this particular term, empirico-inductive research paradigm, it consists of two major terms. We have empirico as well as inductive. So the researcher collects empirical data. That's why we use this empirical observed data from specific cases to generalize its research findings. That is what this empirico-inductive research paradigm means. So basically the researcher will be focusing on a particular case and observing and collecting data from that particular or specific case, and from that observed data the researcher will be generalizing his or her research findings. That is empirico-inductive research paradigm. So if that's the case, consider the options that are given here, and we try to figure out the answers that can be appropriately chosen from this given options. Option A says research is concerned with the process rather than simply with outcomes or product. So basically, if you consider empirico-inductive paradigm of research, that is associated with this inductive approach to research, and also it will be having the qualitative nature to it. All these aspects should be there in your mind, and consider option A. Research is concerned with the process rather than simply with outcomes or products. So if you consider empirico-inductive research paradigm, we have another term that is opposite to it, that is hypothetico-deductive paradigm to research as well. So empirico-inductive research paradigm, or if you consider a qualitative research in that sense, we can say that it is particularly focusing on the process of the research rather than the outcome. Quantitative research or hypothetical deductive approach to research is basically focusing on outcomes and results, whereas empirico-inductive paradigm is more closer or more focused on the process of the research. So option A can be taken for this particular question. Option B says, based on logical positivist philosophy which assumes a single objective reality. So it is empirico-inductive and it is qualitative in nature. In that respect, it can be associated with post-positivistic philosophy. I have already mentioned that. So it says logical positivist philosophy, so that option cannot be taken here. So eliminate that option. Come to option C. Researchers are concerned with what are called participant perspectives. I have already mentioned about this participant perspectives, and we have a discussion on that particular term as well. So that is associated to qualitative or empirico-inductive approach to research. In that case, we can say that option C can be taken as an option or an answer for this question. And then we have attempts to establish universal context-free generalization. What do you mean by that? So if you consider empirico-inductive paradigm of research or qualitative research or inductive research, we said that we are focusing on a specific case, right? So we are focusing on a specific case, and that specific case is actually being observed, and from that we are collecting data and we are coming up with general conclusion. So basically this conclusion is based on a particular context, or the general conclusion that we are taking from this particular study is based on that particular case. It might not be generalized to another context. There is possibilities, but still, if you consider qualitative or empirico-inductive research paradigm, or this inductive paradigm or inductive research paradigm, inductive approach to research in general, we can say that in those cases, we are actually coming up with ideas or general rules which are context specific, because we are focusing on a specific case. From that we are collecting data, and those collected data is actually leading us to a proper conclusion. So that conclusion or the general idea that we are coming up with is actually based on that particular scenario that we have already observed. So basically the generalized or this general ideas coming from this empirico-inductive paradigm of research is basically context specific. But here it says it attempts to establish universal context-free generalization. So context-free generalization is more applicable to hypothetico-deductive research paradigm, or you can say the deductive approach to research, or the quantitative approach to research. In that case, we are starting with a theory from which we are coming up with a hypothesis, we are testing that hypothesis, and the conclusion that we are getting from that particular study is basically or it can be generalized to another cases as well, even without considering the context. So that is how it goes. So basically the option D that is given here is associated with hypothetical deductive paradigm of research, or you can say it as quantitative or reductive or even positivistic approach to research. So D cannot be an answer for this question. So what we have observed and what we have discussed so far, we can say that option A and C will be answer for this question. So A and C only is option D. So the right answer for this question is obviously option D. Moving to the next question. Scientists should put aside their personal beliefs and biases and see the world as really is. Which one of the following philosophical positions supports the above statements? And we have the options constructivism, inductivism, positivism and positivism. So basically the statement here says that the scientists should have to put aside their own personal beliefs, their biases, their own imaginations, their own intuitions, everything aside, and they have to actually describe, or they have to define the world as really is. So basically it focuses on the explanation of an objective reality, right? So it doesn't consider this imagination or personal interest, personal biases, personal intuitions, personal beliefs, anything of that sort. So from what we have learned or what we have discussed so far, you might now got an idea, right? So this is basically associated with positivism. So if you consider post-positivism, it is more focused, or it gives importance to the personal imaginations, personal opinions and all that. So because it focuses on subjective reality, right? So in this statement it says that no, we have to put aside all these beliefs, our own biases and everything aside, and we have to define the world as really is. So basically the answer for this question is option C, that is positivism. So as we have a question from this particular approach, even though I have already mentioned the concepts that are associated with it, I think it's really helpful if you can go much deeper into this particular philosophical position, that is positivism, so that you can have a more clear idea about it. So positivism, as I have already mentioned, it is an epistemological position or a philosophical idea that holds that the goal of knowledge is simply to describe phenomena that we experience. So it is based on it actually gathers information, or it actually defines knowledge as the phenomenon of collecting experiences, or it is actually collecting data from what we experience, and that can be actually called as empiricism, right? Empiricism means we are actually describing phenomenon based on our own experiences. So as I have already mentioned, it focuses on an objective reality where we are referring to an evidence-based reality that can be mathematically interpreted. So according to positivistic approach, conclusion should be on verifiable facts and not purely on intuition. So our intuitions, imagination, our own beliefs, our own biases, that has nothing to do with positivism. According to positivistic approach, the conclusions should be on verifiable facts. So as this positivistic approach or positivist actually focuses on reality, and it actually trying to describe a world that is real in itself, or it focuses on objective reality, positivists are also known as realists. So positivism is mostly a quantitative paradigm, that is what we can observe and measure. So that is what I have already mentioned in the beginning also. So positivism can be attached, or it can be associated with deductive or quantitative paradigms. So coming back to our question, I have already explained the question as well. So we have a much deeper look into the concept of positivism as well. Anyway, the right answer for this question is option C. So in this video, we have discussed the questions, sample questions that were asked from this particular area, approaches to research in our recent exam, NTA UGC NET December 2020 and June 2021 merge cycles. So as I have already mentioned, approaches to research is a very, very important area under research aptitude. These are just samples, these are just sample questions that were asked from this particular area. In the recent exam, there were a lot of questions that were asked in different shifts from this particular topic, that is approaches to research. If you consider the questions that we have discussed in this session as well, it is not like very easy, very direct questions. If you know the concepts, if you know what are the peculiarities of each and every approaches to research, then only you can answer these questions. So the questions were not that easy as well if you consider this particular area, approaches to research, and the questions that were asked from this as well. So I hope now you have a general idea about the various approaches to research, and we have taken very important questions from the recent exam and explained it as well. So if you need a very proper guidance or a very structured guidance or very structured methodology for your preparations, Appleby Academy is really happy to help you out in that respect. So if you want to have online or offline classes for your preparations of NTA UGC NET, you can just contact us. We are providing online as well as offline classes. Our offline admissions are open now for the December 2022 NET exam as well. And if you consider online option, we have online classes also available here. So we are having a very systematic scientific LMS platform provided for our students, which actually gives an opportunity for the students to access various learning resources in different modes. We have pre-recorded video sessions, and we have very systematic notes available in the platform, and also PPTs, test papers. All these together forms Appleby Academy's learning management system. So if you consider, or if you want to know more about Appleby Academy's online or offline courses, you can just contact to the number that is given in the description box. And we are providing classes for economics, commerce, English, management and general paper as well. So please feel free if you want to know more about our courses, and you can contact the number that is given in the description box. So thanks for watching and happy learning.